and happy Sabbath. So I hope you brought a good appetite with you, because as much as we have food in the kitchen today, you need to put some pounds on today. But no worries, the week is coming where we can drop them off. Well, I'm very thankful for the music. It's coming in. Hearing the music is like having the heater on in the sanctuary. Well, this is our last Sabbath in this church in this year. Now I'm paying back to James. He always surprises us with something here, right? When it comes up, Yeah, we have been almost a year with you. And today is the last Sabbath of 2024, but we're looking forward to many more Sabbaths to come together. About 2 weeks ago, my aunt passed away in Germany. The Lord laid her to rest, and this was one of my favorite aunts I grew up with. More than 10 years we lived house to house together. And actually when we moved there, I was 5 years old. My parents built a house, and they called it the White House. The White House was a reason for because it was white outside. And my mom she would paint it every year. She would, paint it white. It was, I don't know, it was a German thing that they did every year to paint the whole house around, and it was like 9 ceilings high inside, and about, now I'm in meters. I need to do that in feet. Otherwise you will say, Pastor, your room was too small. So it was 4 by 4 in meters, but we need to go not in inches, but in feet. 15 by 15, thank you. Yeah, you were very good. 15 by 15, 4 rooms, and the other ones was even 5 by 4, which is, even 16 by 15. It was like 4 rooms, very simple construction. And when we moved there, our parents built the house, and and my aunt and uncle, they lived near us. And my father poured the foundation, helped with the structure to put the walls up. And so we had 2 White Houses now. So now we couldn't refer it as the White House. But coming from school, I would see our house, the White House. I knew I'm going direction to my home. And what is left behind is the memory of how we were growing up. And there were 2 things I liked about my aunt. She always would prepare something. Not that my mom was not a good cook, but she would make something very delicious. And my cousin, we were 4 brothers in our family, and 5 on their side, 5 children, 3 cousins, 2 boys and 3 girls. And he would always, from Arthur, say, come, my mom prepared your favorite food, let's go eat. They would just walk over from my house and go eat together. And then she made also something sweet afterwards, maybe not so good for the teeth, but I loved that thing, and I couldn't get away from that. I would eat it, and with such a delight, But then she also said something very interesting that kind of stuck in my mind concerning the marriage, And she said, there should be always one who will give in when an argument comes up. And of course, she didn't mean that she will be the only one always to give in an argument. But she said the marriage only works if there's one who will give in. And I knew this was not my uncle. It was not him. It was like the icebreaker. He would go until he hits the wall, and then he will think and turn around. But she was a soul that, kind of had the ability to gather us kids together, especially during the harvest, when they would get those potatoes out of the ground. I always mix up those 2. Potatoes out of the ground, and especially the round ones, the small ones. She would wash them, and she would fry them, and then line us up on the table, and then everybody, not even waiting for the forks to come, we would eat with the hands. This was kind of, I have from her in my memory. And of course, I'm looking forward to the day when I can embrace you again. Was 10 years younger than my mom, but, sudden death took her. When I look into Jesus' life and his ministry and teaching his disciples this 3.5 years, and this morning we reflected to the Sabbath school a lot about his life, there was one lesson that he wanted to teach his disciples. One last lesson. And it was the lesson of humility. I always wondered, wasn't there anything else he could taught his disciples? How to, for example, back in Canada, we struggled with demon possession. There was one sister in church. She came and she said, "Pastor, you need to come. My house is haunted." And she would get up at night and somebody would grab her on the leg underneath the bed, And she was so scared to enter her house. And I called my elders and said, "We need to go and pray over her." But then the government had a restriction. You cannot enter anybody's house because, you only have to stay in your, they call it I forgot the term, in your bubble. That's what they called it, in your bubble. And only who belong to your bubble were able to visit each other. And so we prayed over the phone and asking the Lord to lead and to guide and protect her. I think that's the saddest thing when you in your own house don't feel safe enough. And it was possessed, that house, and we prayed over the phone and asked the Lord to protect this house. The other thing I would expect Jesus to teach his disciples how to walk on the water. Wouldn't be something, something that you can do that others cannot do. I can do something. I have the power to drive the demons out. I have the power to walk on the water. And, or even better, how to multiply those 12, those 5 breads and 3 fish for 5,000 and then 3,000 people. Wouldn't be that something that Jesus would teach his disciple to do? I have this power to multiply the bread and make it so abundant that it's enough for everyone. That something like that, or, to preach. Wouldn't be somebody happy to know how to preach and how to reach the people's hearts, and how to convince them to come to Jesus, accept Christ as his personal Savior. But no, he chooses not all of those, but he asks for humility. He asks to teach them, the disciples, to learn the last lesson that he has before he leaves and goes to his Father. He wants to teach them the lesson of humility. So why is it so important to learn the lesson of humility? I would like to invite you to go to chapter 13 of John, and there, verse 1. Chapter 13. Either I'm getting deaf or I'm losing my voice. Something is with the mic. Okay, it's back. Yeah. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and to go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The evening meal was in the progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had given all in his hands under his power, that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water in a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. Can you imagine that, the teacher and master that everybody admired and everybody, had carried him and had a lot of respect, does something that a slave was assigned to do. A slave that was bought for a price, a slave that didn't have any rights, a slave that would do what he was commanded to do. And Jesus takes up this role of a slave and washes his own disciples' feet. I probably would be like Peter, not wanting him to do that. You have people maybe in your life that you admire, that you respect, and that you see them in high positions, but then you walk in McDonald's on a Sunday morning and seeing them mopping the floor or cleaning the toilet. How do you feel about that? How do you think of these people? Or they may be in the cashier in Meijer and earning $13.50 an hour. Now we had an increase in Michigan. But Jesus took a job that no one wanted. Everybody was ready, lined up, and to be served, because there must be someone who would come and wash their feet. And it was a custom. When you come to somebody's house, like we have chairs, we have tables, but they will lay down. They will lay down and maybe on their elbow, just on the floor, a soft cushion, and then ready, stretch out their feet away from them, and people would come and wash their feet. I'm sure this morning we all had a shower, at least last night. Some of us washed feet and socks and shoes, and they're all clean. But imagine them going to Jerusalem, going to the streets of Jerusalem. And of course, as they went to Jerusalem, everybody brought their own sacrifice with them, not knowing that the sacrifice is already there. Sometimes we're preparing everything in our lives, not understanding that whatever preparation we have done, there's already a bigger preparation for us done. And so Jesus comes and goes around and washes everybody's feet, and we know that he did it with Judas as well, and because he gives him the bread afterwards. And no one objected him. No one objected Jesus doing the act of a servant, of a slave that has no right. But Jesus is not ashamed of this duty. He's not ashamed to wash their feet. And as you imagine, as you wash your feet, and you probably can imagine yourself washing your brother, sister feet, you go to the toe and the toes and you wash in between and just, and then you're realizing that the feet are dirty. Because in Greek it says hypodemos, they wore sandals. And when you wear sandals, they are not closed, they are open. And wherever you go, you will not always see where you're stepping in. And all the smell is up in the room. And I always ask myself a question. They would never enter my house because my wife would stop them right there. But they were all the way through in the house, and they lay down. And then when they lay down, they wash get their feet washed. It's not like pulling in the car wash and the machine does it. No, here is a person who is there to wash their feet. He came to Simon Peter and said to him, "Lord, you are not going to wash my feet." And I probably will object it too. "Not you, Lord. Let me wash myself. I'd rather wash my feet myself before I allow you to wash my feet." Wouldn't you object Jesus as well? Would tell Jesus, "No, somebody else should do that, not you." We have people who have low ranks in lives, and they will do that. No, he will not wash. And sometimes we would probably abstain and not wanting to do this to us. And verse 7, Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I'm doing, but later you will understand." Again, Peter objects and says, "No, you shall never wash my feet." Can you imagine? It's not like getting a massage or shaking a hand or from the back, No, the lowest of the body are the feet. And just imagine what would we do without our feet? None of us will be probably here today. They are less appreciated, but they are the most that do the work, the dirty work. Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." Unless I wash you, you have no part with me. Today we have gathered together to remember what Jesus has passed on to us, washing each other's feet. And after the prayer and the song prior to that, Elder James will give us instructions where to go. And as we go, we wash each other's feet, we follow the example of Jesus, and there are not many churches who follow that example today. They do communion, they take the bread and the wine, but they don't wash feet anymore. Is there anything else in my life that I see as not important anymore? Is there anything in my life that I don't see not needed anymore, what the Scripture has written? Is there anything that I should have done before washing feet each other? Jesus talks about forgiveness. Forgiveness, and to Peter he spoke that 70 times 7, that what ought to be forgiven. And sometimes we carry in us those things that we should have given away and laid at the cross, foot of the cross, and allow God to deal with that. But something is holding us back. Something is pushing us from doing this. And if I look at my uncle, which I shared in the story, he's like the icebreaker, hard to stop, and sometimes, only the wall can stop him. Pride. Sometimes we're dealing with pride that hinders us to accept the gift, but also to pass it on to others. The Lord said, "Simon, Peter, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well." So for Peter, he is either in or he is completely out. He was the oldest of the disciples, and he was the first one to speak, maybe without thinking, but it's impossible without thinking to say anything. Maybe not carefully thinking what he was saying, but he was all in with his heart. He was all with the Lord. Whatever the Lord wanted to him, he wanted to be him. I want to be like Peter. I want to be like Peter. But sometimes it's very hard to be like Peter. Because when you become like Peter, you might embarrass yourself. Because you didn't think through and then just did something. Verse 10, Jesus answered, "Those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. The whole body is clean, but you are clean, though not every one of you." For he knew who was going to betray him, and that's why he said, "Not everyone was clean." It's very important to understand that Jesus had 12 disciples, and Judas, he joined the group. Everybody was called, but he just joined the group. And joining the group, it not necessarily means that you will be successful. I have to think about the Israelites when they left Egypt. There were no prerogatives to leaving Egypt, but there were requirements in entering the promised land. So may God give us the strength to, as we accept Christ as who we are, that we allow him to change us so we have this right to enter the promised land, fulfilling the requirements, the prerogatives that God has put into us. He said, "Be ye holy as your Father in heaven is holy." When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. "Do you understand what I have done for you?" he asked them. "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet." It's interesting that he didn't couple them to wash their feet. I assume there will be a big argument who will start to wash the feet and who should wash his feet. And as they had the argument, who will sit with Jesus at the throne when they take over Jerusalem and the Romans. But Jesus, in all quietude, he went and set them an example. Not to be ashamed or be embarrassed, but showing them an example of humility. A humility of serving others. Somehow putting myself away and honoring others and caring more for others has a better gain than pursuing your own goals. "I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Verily, truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who has sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." So the blessing comes not by observing. The blessing doesn't come by listening, although it also gives instructions, but the blessing comes by doing it. We know many things. We know the scriptures, we know that the Sabbath is the right day, 10 Commandments, state of that, we know many things. But it's not the knowledge, but how much do we apply what we have learned. And it's not easy, it's easy on the Sabbath to be nicely dressed, to come to church and worship together, but at home is difficult. How do we get along at home? How much of humility is seen on a Monday afternoon after a long weekend? So may God bless us and give us the energy to be like Jesus, to be like Peter, following the example. It's very interesting when we read the context in which John 14 is written, the same context when Jesus gives them the instructions of communion. It says, "I am the teacher and the Lord." In school, and we have Bill, our long year experienced teacher, he would give instructions to students how to do things. And then they had the choice, either they do all the homework or just partial or none of it, and then the grades accordingly will be of the homework. But Jesus calls himself also Lord. So as a teacher, I give you instructions, but as the Lord, I expect you to follow those instructions. If you love me, keep my commandments. It's always an invitation, but he, as the Lord, has the right to claim what he says. Give me your heart. We just sing in the song, Lord, that's all I can give. I give you my heart. In chapter 14 is the same evening, the same night, the same when they had the foot washing and everything. Jesus foretells the betrayal, betrays Peter's denial. And in the same context, he assures them about his goals and where he's going. Chapter 14, verse 1 says, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. Verse 2, my Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, I would have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way and the place where I'm going. So not only he prepared and washed their feet and is preparing himself to be denied, betrayed, and crucified, but he also points out there is something to come. And this translation says there are many rooms. Some translations say there are many mansions. You know, when we look at this, we look maybe more like from a Western perspective, that there are many rooms. But if I look to Adam and Eve back in Eden, how many rooms did they have? None. No rooms. So why do we need to have housing and rooms nowadays? It's not easy to answer that question, right? Just look outside. It's cold. We need a house, we need the heating, we need a roof, we need the walls, we need windows, doors. You know, it has to be warm. So since the fall and the sin came to our world, we need protection. Why do we need a lock in the door? Somebody might come we haven't invited to, right? So protection again. But if we go to heaven, there's no protection needed anymore. So if you look in the mansions, and the Greek word says rooms or room. If you want a more correct translation, I want to prepare for you a room. Not a room like a physical object, but a room where you can live, like Adam and Eve. I'm going to prepare a space, exactly, a space, a place for you. A place for you. And if we look in our world today, how much of our earth is actually used for living. We used to live in Canada. They have always, like Toronto is a place that you have some other cities, but in between there's all empty. Just woods and bears and snow. Not much going on, you know. But in heaven or a new earth, better to say, will be different because we don't have this anymore, this snow and cold and winter, but the climate like in Hawaii. But no volcanoes, right? No volcanoes, you know. So it's imagine that the Lord said, I'm gonna prepare a place. And then it says, and if I go, in verse 3, and if we look into original text, it means, like if we read the English, say, and if I go, it means he might not go. But the original text says, Ian, it means, and when I go. So it's not an if I go, it's when I go. Amen. You know, it's very interesting to understand that, you know, when I go, I prepare a place for you. You know, I prepare a place for you that you come and be where I am. You know, and when I look at this, you know, knowing that he's to pass his final exam, if we go with the academic language here, you know, the betrayal, denial, and then crucifixion, he doesn't think about himself. He doesn't think about how I'm going to go through, what will happen to me. And even those who are very close to me, they will leave me. But John and the 4 women at the cross. But he thinks about the disciples. He thinks about the disciples that they should not have a heart with trouble. They should not be afraid of the things. When they see those things happening, they should more look beyond those things. Look to the place which I'm going to prepare for you. But learn humility and trust me. I'll get you there. And when I go prepare a place for you, I will come back. You know, how many people we have heard in our lives that they made a promise and still waiting for today. You know, some promises to come true because we're human. We make promises, but some of the promises we can't keep, like I can buy an ice cream for my daughter or son. But if it's like beyond my strength, beyond my ability, and if I give a promise, and the Bible says don't do something that you cannot keep, but he can. Although everything is before him, the betrayal, denial, the crucifixion, what they own people betrayed him, and Caiaphas, the high priest, and I always, this morning in the Sabbath school, we talked about how can you be so close and still so far. The religious leader had the language, had the scriptures, had the scrolls, and still they're far away from Jesus. Even the Roman governor was closer to Jesus, who tried to save him. But very interesting is when I did the study, I realized that Caiaphas might not be in heaven, although he was the high priest. We don't have it in the scriptures, but we have the outside. Josephus Flavius shed some light in the second thief on the cross to the right. And he claims that thief at the cross, and the Bible confirms it, that he will be in heaven. But did you know who that thief at the cross was? I read the book, again a second, it's not in the Bible, but the author of that book claims that that was the son of Caiaphas. Can you imagine? The son of Caiaphas will be in heaven, but the father not. And he was a thief and a robber and involved in the crimes, but he will be in heaven. I will give some information, will not leave you just with the fact. When he was about 5 years old and his name was David, he was captured by his servant, by Caiaphas' servant. Apparently Caiaphas, according to Josephus Flavius, didn't treat his servant well, and so just to pay him back, he abducted his child and made him to a robber. And now the time has come when Jesus is leaving this earth and he is on the cross and he is dying at the cross and he calls him Lord. Lord, remember me when you go to heaven, when you will be in paradise. This was the son who learned from the father how to be a Christian, but was taken out of his place and displaced and became a robber and a thief. But in the end, he is saved. But about the Caiaphas, we don't know. So may God give us the strength and the energy to trust the Lord that he does all things good. And sometimes we don't see the ones who we love to see in the church, and we think they are perished. We don't know. But those who are in the church think they are saved. God forbid that we go perish. May the God teach us the lesson of humility and accept and embrace those who are longing to be part of this church and be part of his church, will experience his salvific power. Before the prayer, I heard I will hear a song by Ingrid. She's going to sing it in Silent Night in German. Not only will I hear a song, but I also will hear it in German. And those who know it in English, you probably can just follow in your heart or with your voice and helping Ingrid to hear and to sing that song. This one, Demetrius?
Try the blue one.
I did it. Yes, here we go. Perfect. Thank you.